Northshore Residents Association, Vanessa Scammell. You are not Vanessa. Just tell me you're not Vanessa.
Transgender.
I think there was a little bit of confusion around this one because it said, do you wish to present your submission at a hearing? No.
Yes, Lady Mayor, councillors, staff and fellow funders. Perhaps a personal intro. I chair Northshore Residents, and Northshore sees themselves pretty much as gatekeepers and caretakers for our two beach and forest assets, alongside, of course, the rangers for Bottle Lake Forest Park and Coast Care. And so anything that enhances the area, and of course we're lucky we're in an area that wasn't part of it anyway, but we see the relative deprivation further down the beach, and we see the promenade as really an economic game changer for the area because the thing is so visible. And Northshore as a residents association, I think, was probably instrumental in putting through the Burwood Pegasus Community Board the notion of the consideration of a continuing line item for this. And I think we mentioned 200k a year for 10 years, which would add, if I'm correct, to 2 million. And so the first point I'd like to make is that I think the funding is largely already there if that community board line item is in fact accepted. I don't think it's additional on top. That was the whole purpose of getting it through the community board well prior to the formulation of the LTP. But I'm open to be corrected on that, but I just make that point. The second point is that I think in the other submissions, which I've reviewed online, and congratulate you for doing so, and I've also looked at the Burwood Pegasus Board submissions, I think the linkages to the other tracks, the other facilities, and the notion of a network really needs to be pushed. This would help the whole thing. And I make the additional point, which, if I'm not mistaken, Councillor Manji had made at Kim's presentation on Wednesday, that should this be widened. And I think the point we would make about the widened scope is that it doesn't all have to be a super duper promenade. It can get wilder and narrower and different character as you move away from the centre, but the notion of a definite track should be there. And of course this ties in nicely to Murky's Walk, the Christchurch perimeter track, that sort of thing, and it becomes a destination in its own right. So one of the issues out in the east is that there's no obvious destination. You know, you go out, you walk on the pier, you have a coffee, now what? And effectively there's business linkages can come out of this, obviously. I think Kim in her dissertation mentioned going up to New Plymouth and riding an electric bike up their promenade. Now, she didn't take the electric bike with her, she hired it. If you look at the segways that you can hire up at Kaikoura, that sort of thing. I mean, there's lots of small local livings to be made out of a facility like that. And when we look at the facility itself, and I refer back now to my very young background as a roading person, when we used to make and seal 20 miles of new seal every year in a little rural county in Southland. I don't think you need to overthink the construction even of the sort of promenade that Kim showed you. Sand is a wonderful base for anything if you can confine its edges sufficiently, and the sort of ground pressures you're going to put on it are skateboarders, the occasional sweeping vehicle, that sort of thing. It's not a highway, it's not a road. So that we've got tracks up in adjacent to Waimari Beach, built just on top of the sand hill, that are nothing but a little bit of rubble, a few fines and a binder on top. And they've been there for 30 years. And they're still nice and solid, they're still perfectly adequate for walking on. We use them every day. So that again, I say, we don't need this sort of massive engineering proposal. The route, the gradients, the levels, yes, but I'm not sure that there's a super duper construction project in this. And finally, the proposal is on a bus route from end to end, from Beach Road right through to Brighton is a public transport route. So this means that you've got assured access, so that, for example, if a gold card holder in the middle of the day wants to travel off Peak Tree to the beach, they're there. Similarly, there's good links to and from, even if you extend beyond that. And this is, I think, an opportunity for the East. It's a small project in the overall scheme of things, but it's a very transformational one. And I think, you know, having talked to some of the developers in our area, I wouldn't like to see this fall down the hole of a massive feasibility study in which every possible objection in the world is raised. I just don't think it needs to go that far. I think, for example, we don't want to hear staff talking about we can't do this because we're into managed retreat. You know, that's a meme that's been repeated as though it's policy. Well, we didn't vote for that in the East, and we never will. So we just say the promenade is a place to recreate, build it, and it'll come. Thank you.
Very good. Questions? Bill?
It sounds like in terms of what's called the promenade, and what's called the promenade, in fact, your view too is that it doesn't need to be a highway in all places, and in fact, a more simple path in places is something that your Residents Association is asking for. I just want to clarify that in comparison, say, there's been some different views presented.
I think we would support Kim's proposal in its entirety.
Okay.
In the sense, you know, the Ngānaru Trust, the 900 metres of a 9 metre wide promenade. I'm simply making the point that if that was extended sort of north and south to join up with the other proto tracks that are there, the extensions need not be to the same design, the same standard, etc. Hence the thought that you don't need to overthink the whole thing in terms of the scale that's been proposed for that central piece. I do think there's merit in extending it to Brighton because that's an obvious linkage point.
I think that was the point that Councillor Manji made yesterday, or the day before yesterday, was that it just seems so obvious to link it to the pier.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to the Avon, Otakaro cycleway network,
Yeah.
wherever that's going to end up, sort of thing. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question, but I don't want to offend anyone. No, well, it's just the comment around managed retreat, because you're the second person to use it today, and the first person to use it raised it in the context of the Tonkin and Taylor report. So there is going to be a consultation it's more of a public engagement around the development of a natural hazard strategy, which will start shortly after Queen's birthday weekend. So the idea is not to go to the end point, it's to start at the very beginning, which is understanding the natural hazards that face our coastline, that face our flood risks, which are in both stage 1 and then subsequently will be in stage 2 of the natural hazards chapter of our district plan review. So there is no intention of going straight to a position which is the absolute last resort position, and a position that we don't have a policy on. So nothing like that is being proposed at this stage, and you know, I'm hoping that we learn to understand what our risks are and how we live with those risks and how we adapt our environments to those risks. But I think not fronting up to the risks would be worse than pretending that they're not there, because they are.
I think I'd just make the simple point that staff are inclined to act as though this is policy already. And I'll give you a classic example, the boardwalk around the estuary from roughly, it'll be from Bridge Street really to Estuary Road. It goes around the edge. Half of it is track through an area that's now been felled, half of it is boardwalk. It's not being maintained. And it's a loss of a little recreation facility. But to the east, it just feels like the death of 1,000 cuts.
So where is that? Which side of the estuary?
East side of the estuary, and it runs
So South Brighton
around
Domain.
literally the edge, the seaward edge of the estuary.
Most of that boardwalk was disrupted with the earthquake, and it hasn't been reinstated.
Okay.
And the thought is that it may never be because of managed retreat.
Oh, no,
Now you see, this is an example of
yeah, but you're
of
going to the
maintenance
end point.
deferral.
It may be that it's not in the right place due to the exposure of new risks because that land has dropped, you know. I mean, we've mimicked, predictions on sea level rise in less than a minute with the drop in our land.
Well, tack that onto the top of it and you just cope with 20 centimetres of sea rise. You know, that's what I say, this stuff doesn't need to be overthought.
Yeah, but moving it inland might actually do the same trick without, you know, creating other risks. I mean, with every action there is a reaction, but there is a lot of water to go under the bridge, dare I use that phrase, before we get to an end point. But look, I mean, your residents association and all of the residents associations, all the community groups, all of the trusts, everyone that we've listened to from the east will have a big part in working through the development of that natural hazards policy. So it is not, our staff are not going out there with a predetermined position. They're going out there to engage communities in a real serious discussion about the science and about the implications of the situation that we're not faced with on our own. The rest of the world is looking at the reality of sea level rise and increased storm events, you know, over the next 50, 100, 200 years. So it's a long-term view, it's not a short-term.
That's fine.
Yep.
We're all edge residents, we accept the risks of being on an edge.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.